DJ Metal Craig of Craig's Maelstrom here. I have one of the members of Final Coil with me today. Hey, how's it going? And would you like to introduce yourself and what position you do in the band?
Hey Craig, thank you very much indeed for having me on. My name's Phil Styles. I am the lead singer and I'm the guitarist of Final Coil.
And to get into the first typical question I ask to get a bit of history of the band, please go back in the history of how the band Final Coil all got started.
Sure, yeah. So we began in 2008, this kind of version of the band. And it was me and Richard Audrey, the lead guitarist, and Yola, the bassist. And we, like most bands, started out just kind of jamming on some original tunes that have been floating around. And we recorded a couple of EPs, which we self-released. And somehow the second one of those, Closed to the Light, which came out, I think, in 2011, I think, got the attention of Wormhole Death. And they got in touch and they gave us the opportunity to work with them. So we traveled out to Italy for a month and we recorded our label debut, which was Persistence and Memory. And that came out, I think, in 2017. We spent a month in Italy recording that album. And it did pretty well, and we got some really good shows off the back of that. We got to play with like Hard Rock Hell Metal Festival, and we got to play Uprising, which had bands like Hell playing. And then we went back out to Italy for another month in 2018, and we did our second album, our sophomore album, which was The World We Left Behind for Others. And that came out in 2019, and we had a really good run off the back of that. We got to play with the Japanese legendary punk band Shonen Knife, and we got to play with Marky Ramone, both shows down in London, and we played Fusion Festival where we did the album in its entirety. And then, of course, COVID hit and ripped the wind out of our sails. So we kind of had about 18 months where we weren't really able to play live, but we did spend the time kind of writing and prepping new material. And we eventually gathered in a studio in Kettering with the legendary Russ Russell, who is known for his work recording Napalm Death and Dimmu Borgir. And we recorded The World We Inherited. And that is a very, very short kind of précis of our career and ignores a lot of the sticky floored venues and late night sessions, but it gives you an idea of who we are as a band.
This next one's always a good one. How did you guys come up with the band name Final Coil?
um, well, I was when I actually started this band, it like the first version of this band, it was like a solo project back in 2002 when I was at university, and it was a combination of a line from Hamlet, which talks about this mortal coil. But of course, there is a band called This Mortal Coil, and I don't think they would take too kindly to our pinching their name. And I was also a big fan of Dante's Inferno, which has this kind of idea of hell as a series of kind of circles going down towards the center, or coils, if you like. And I thought, the final coil, so it's got this kind of idea of mortality and finality, but it also had this idea of kind of progressing through the depths of the underworld. And I thought, wow, it's quite a nice literary name. It's abstract enough that if you don't care about the sort of literature behind it, it's just a cool name. And if you do ask, then I've got a reason why that is who we are. So yeah, it's a combination of Shakespeare and Dante's Inferno, and it's a slightly gloomy name for a slightly gloomy band.
Cool. And I think I had read back in high school the Dante's Inferno literature.
It's an amazing piece of writing, truly remarkable, and of course it's influenced so much music. You might remember back in the day there was a Nirvana T-shirt which had like the spirals on the front. It was called the Vestibule T-shirt, and that was based off the drawings of Dante's Inferno. So it's one of those pieces of literature that either in terms of content or in terms of aesthetic, really rumbles through rock music.
Right on, man. And before we get into the next question, I have a question for you. Have you ever read any of Friedrich Nietzsche's stuff?
No, I can't say that I have actually. Surprisingly, it's something that you would have thought I would have dug into, but no, I haven't.
German philosopher, very deep stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, I'm sort of aware of him, and I've done a lot of sort of political philosophy over my time, but for whatever reason, have never dug into his.
Who's all in the current Final Coil lineup, and what instruments do they play?
So there's me. I play guitar and I sing and I do the sort of synthy stuff. Then there is Yola Styles. She is the bassist and she also does a lot of our sort of artwork. Not the covers of the albums. That's usually done by someone else, but she does a lot of like the posters and design and stuff. There's Richard Audrey, who is the lead guitarist, and he also does backing vocals. And he does a lot of other instrumental bits in recording. So he also plays some piano and some synth stuff. And our drummer is G. Neil.
Sorry, I lost my place in the question for a second.
It's all good.
How did you guys come up with the Final Coil Bamo logo, and who was the artist used to design it?
So the logo, that was Andy Pilkington, and he is the designer who runs under the name of Very Metal Art. You will definitely have seen his designs. He's worked with Skin Dread, Flotsam and Jetsam. He's just designed the recent Judas Priest cover. So he's a really capable, really prolific artist. We've worked with Andy a lot. He did our first ever lyric video back in the day for a track from the EP Close to the Light. He's done the covers of all three of our albums to date. And it was his logo. I mean, we gave him a brief. We sort of said what we wanted very, very broadly. And he came back with that fantastic kind of logo with all the colored braiding and the swirls and loops, and it just looked amazing. It blew us away. But that's kind of the way that Andy works. Very often you kind of give him a very vague idea of what you want and he'll just go off and produce something pretty awesome. And that's one of the reasons why we've worked with him so continuously. So yeah, Andy Pilkington and Very Metal Art, highly recommended if you can find a time when he's not absolutely jammed with work.
That's awesome, man. Just so you know, I thought the album art and the Bamo were absolutely sick and amazing.
Thank you so much. I think particularly the new one. I think it looks a little bit kind of Memoriam, who you were mentioning earlier. It's kind of got that vibe to it. So yeah, I think Andy does a great job. You know, really, but it's all on him.
This next question is a good one. How did you guys come up with the album title, The World We Inherited?
Strap yourself in. This is going to be a long one. The last album that we did was The World We Left Behind for Others, and that was a concept record which was basically looking at how the world had kind of got to the point that it was in 2017, 2018. And it was basically telling stories from the life of my grandmother and my grandfather, and kind of using their experiences of living through the war, World War II, and living through the immediate post-war sort of scenario, and how they formulated like their view of the world. And really the idea was to kind of question how the world became so polarized that we ended up with, in America, you had the election of Donald Trump, and in England, we had Brexit. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to take a position on either one of those two things. I have my personal views, but that's irrelevant. The idea behind the album was simply to question how these two, amongst a lot of very divisive things, how these two very divisive kind of things happen. Because if you look at, America, it seems to be very split down the middle with, Donald Trump, and there are people who are absolutely for and people who are completely against. And here in the UK, we had the same thing. People were split down the middle whether to vote for Brexit or vote against Brexit. And if you think about sort of the history of sort of the immediate post-war period, there was it was democracy was about compromise and it was about discussion. And my kind of point on that album was that we've moved away from compromise and discussion and we've moved more to shouting kind of slogans at one another without really being able to come to an agreement. So that was the world we left behind for others. And this album takes that narrative forward. And this album is much more about the world we've inherited. So it's like, okay, we've talked about where we've come from, where potentially is all this kind of conflict, all this drama, all this polarization, where is it taking us? And particularly it looks at this through the lens of conspiracy theories. So the sort of the narrative, the concept, if you like, is that the kind of main character becomes very deeply involved with conspiracy theories, and they start to lose touch with their family and their friends, and they start to question everything and become very kind of scared, really, of the world around them, and potentially even kind of combative in that. So, you know, that's the sort of probably the shortest version of the album kind of title and concept that I can kind of give you.
Right on, man. And just before we get into the next question, just so you know, I feel you guys are a combination of progressive metal and progressive rock genre-wise for your music.
Oh, thank you. And you know, I think that everyone, I think, kind of brings their own kind of interpretation to it because we have quite a broad sound. So sometimes we hear progressive metal, sometimes we hear progressive rock, sometimes we get post rock and post metal. But you know, if you say to me like progressive metal, immediately I'm thinking of bands like kind of Queensryche and Operation Chrome, and you know, stuff like that. So if that's in the ballpark, then I would say that's a pretty high compliment.
Before I get into the question, as we're talking about progressive bands, you know who your vocals remind me of? This is gonna blow you away. The guy from Dream Theater.
Wow, really? Okay, I've never heard that before, but yeah, that's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. And now we're going to get on to the next question, which is about a song I found that hit home on the album for me. What were the themes and concepts behind the song Out of Sorts?
Okay. Oh, interesting. So yeah, the album's instrumental. Basically that's the end of the narrative. So the character throughout the album goes through a kind of journey. So at the beginning of the album, he's very sort of digging into conspiracy theories, things like chemtrails, Morgellon syndrome, global dominance theory, and then over the album, the character tries on a number of occasions to try and bring themselves back to their family, back to their life. So if you look at By Starlight, for example, that is the character sort of trying to conjure up their happy memories of their life so that they don't keep getting lost behind the screen and keep digging into these conspiracy theories. But they can't quite do it. And by the time you get to Out of Sorts, the character really has kind of lost the plot, and they're kind of hurtling towards their sort of end game, which is a kind of terror attack sort of scenario. So Out of Sorts was my attempt to write a piece of music that was kind of the soundtrack to someone slowly losing their mind. Like, you know, how do you feel when everything feels against you, when the rug has been pulled out from under your feet and you're scared and you're tired and you're desperately unhappy? And that song, you know, if you listen to it, it just keeps building. It starts quite gloomy and sort of atmospheric, and by the end it's incredibly loud and you've got this piercing feedback shooting through it. And you know, if you've ever had like a panic attack or anything like that, you'll know that it kind of feels like that. It's, you know, you feel like the world is just kind of crushing in on you. And that was my attempt to try and capture that in musical form. And yeah, it was a challenging song to write, but I think it came out pretty well.
Okay, awesome. And just so you know, you hear a bit of noise in the background, it's my landlord working in the basement. He's doing some renovation. So we might have a bit of difficulty with some noise levels in the background, just a heads up.
Cool, cool. It's all good. At the moment, I can't hear any of that, so it's all fine.
No, it's not yet. I just heard him go in there. I'm just giving you a heads up if it does start.
No stress, man.
Okay. What are the band's immediate music career goals?
Um, just to, well, musically, I would say it's always to evolve. Every Final Coil album so far, I feel, and I don't know how our audience would agree, but I feel we've got better with every record. I think we've become more interesting. I think we've become musically more adept. Our production has become better. And I would like to always think that we will evolve and do things that challenge us and challenge our listeners a little bit. So musically, obviously, we're going to move on to the next album. We've just completed this trilogy, the Persistence trilogy, because this is the third record in that cycle. So we're going to move on to do a new album. Probably, I would think early next year. I would like to think it was even sooner than that, but I think realistically it'd be early next year, depending on how things go. But before that, we want to play, and we are playing some dates in the UK. We've just booked 2 dates in April. We're going to be playing in Leicester, which is our hometown, and then Nottingham, with two fantastic bands, Tiger, Teiger, and JJ Lovegrove, and they're playing both shows with us. And we're going to be playing those shows in April, and I'm going to be booking more a little bit later on the line. And we're also discussing, and I hope this is going to come together, playing a few dates in Europe. So we're just looking at booking something in Paris at the moment. And if that comes together, we'll be looking at where else we can play. If we play France, it makes sense to play somewhere like Belgium because it's not that far. So that's kind of our ambitions. But I mean, in terms of career-wise, we are a band who are very passionately committed to making music. I'm not convinced that the kind of commercial career side is ever going to be there for a band of our style and size. So we all work. Like Mudhoney, we have our jobs, and we just like to make the music that we want to make without compromise, and then be able to go and play it. So, I think that Final Coil will continue to kind of go along in this vein, but obviously we try to take a step forward with each album. And I have to say, like, this album has had more attention, and there is more noise about us this time. And of course, when more people are talking about you, it means you can do more. So there'll be more shows for sure. And we'll try. We've just done another music video, and there'll definitely be a fourth album as soon as we can get into the studio to make that happen. So those are our kind of basic goals at the moment.
Does the band have any band gear endorsements?
Yes, we do. Actually, you can probably see just behind me hang on, with that shoulder, you can see a Black Star amplifier, and we are endorsed, or I am endorsed by Black Star. I use their HT50 Mark II head, which I absolutely love. And they've actually been wonderful. They lent us some gear for our most recent video, which was really, really kind of them, and gave us like a much better backdrop to work from. So it's been a really kind of beneficial partnership for us. And I never tire of shouting about their cool amplifiers and sound. And hopefully I'm going to be adding to my lineup with another cab at some point. So yeah, we've got that endorsement in play. And we've also worked with Vocal Zone. They endorsed us for a period of time, and that was cool as well. So yeah, we have those in place at the moment.
Right on. And just so you know, before we get into the next question, I'm having fun talking to you today, and this interview is going very well, man. You're doing a great job with this.
Oh, that's really kind of you, man. Well, thank you for the great questions, and for taking the time to dig into our music.
This next one is a really good one. Who are the band's musical influences?
Oh man, how long have you got? It changes almost daily. I think there's definitely some influences that are kind of core to the band. So I would say that Alice in Chains are a huge musical influence for us, and I would also say Tool, and I would say Pink Floyd are sort of really big influences for us. And again, I'm not necessarily saying they're influences in the way that you're going to listen to a song and go, oh, that sounds like Pink Floyd. But rather it's like an atmosphere or a style or an ambience that comes through. But then on top of that, you've got bands like Nine Inch Nails, and particularly the Fragile is like one of the most amazing albums to me in terms of scope and sound and approach. You mentioned, I think you mentioned Paradise Lost earlier, and Paradise Lost is a great example. Because again, you know, they're a band who started out as this kind of raw death doom band, and then they had the more mainstream stuff like Draconian Times, and then of course they had the electronica on 1 Second and Host. So again, you know, I love bands of that ilk that kind of change and evolve over time. And then there's probably a few bands that you would definitely not say are really influences, but they influence us nonetheless, one way or another. Bands like Massive Attack are a huge influence on us because they're very kind of ethical and very musically amazing. And even, you know, like bands like Dark Throne, I love the kind of the purity of their kind of approach and their vision. You know, Dark Throne just make music for Dark Throne, and if other people happen to enjoy it, that's kind of on them. But that, you know, they're a band who are very fiercely committed to their own vision, and I really admire that. So you know, we don't sound anything like them, but still I would say there's a bit of an influence there. So you know, we're a band with very eclectic tastes. You know, you could throw out Manic Street Preachers or Radiohead, Sonic Youth, definitely Neil Young. Yeah, there's so many bands to pick from, and the world of music is so cool and so varied, that you always going to find different things. And I'm always listening, not consciously. You know, it's usually the case that I'll hear something and my brain squirrels it away, and then sort of 6 months later, I'm writing a song and I'm listening back to it, and I think, oh, that comes from that, and I realize later. But you know, it's everything's influence, man. But yeah, I think if you were to really sort of pick up the ones that maybe got us started, Alice in Chains, Tool, Pink Floyd, Anathema, Catatonia, probably that kind of vein would be the kind of the core sort of set, if you like.
Right on, man. Just so you know, one of my personal favorites, as you were mentioning, black metal. I don't know if you've heard of them. There's a depressive black metal act. Make a change, kill yourself.
That's their name.
Yep, they do 20-minute
Wow.
long songs for some of their songs.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out because I'm a big fan. Like, there's so many cool bands that come out of like the dark, like extreme end of the scene. Like, you know, you got bands like Thurgathon, who are like seriously heavy doom, or you got Japanese black metal like Psy, Dark Throne. I absolutely adore Mayhem as well. You know, I think there's something kind of really cool about the sort of the extreme metal scene, in the sense that it really is kind of very pure. Like, they don't care about commerciality at all, and I really admire that. So yeah, very interesting band. So I'll have a listen to Make a Change and Kill Yourself for sure.
Okay, also, just so you know, have you ever heard of the funeral doom metal band Mournful Congregation?
The name rings a bell, but it's not something I have in my collection.
They are absolutely amazing, man. But we've got about 9 minutes left for this interview, so we're going to get on to the last 4 questions if you're cool with it.
Yeah, sure, man.
Would you mind giving some vocal tips for starting out vocalists to help them get their vocal abilities better?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually lost my voice for about 6 months because I was a teacher at the time, and I was using my voice all the time, and I had like issues with reflux, and basically my voice kind of packed up on me. And when I came back, I got a vocal tutor and I worked with them for about a year to kind of rebuild my voice. And one of the best bits of advice I can give to new vocalists is, before you go on stage, no matter how damn stupid you think you're going to look, warm your voice up. Do the scales, do a couple of runs, do the humming quietly to yourself while the band before you plays. If possible, go somewhere and do a proper full warm up. If you can't do it directly before the show, do it earlier in the day when you're in some private place. But basically, warm your vocals up, because if you kind of go in hard, have like from a standing start, you might be able to do it when you're young, but when you get to your like 30s and 40s, you're going to find that you kind of sound like Lemmy with a head cold. So just like, do take the time to warm your vocals up. It's worth doing. There's loads of cool exercises you can do for that.
Right on. And now we're going to get to the last question of the interview. Do you have a personal favorite musician who got you started into your music career? And would you like to talk about who it was?
Well, this is where the metal community switch off and discuss, but it really was Kurt Cobain and Nirvana that kind of changed my perspective on music. I mean, I grew up in the 1980s. I was listening to Queen, I was listening to Iron Maiden, and then I think some neighborhood kid gave me a tape cassette copy of Appetite for Destruction, and I thought that was about the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. And then a couple of years later, Nirvana came out with In Utero. I actually skipped Nevermind and went straight to In Utero. And I thought the sound was like so raw and so primal and so cool that it made me want to pick up a guitar. And from that, I then started to explore bands like Sonic Youth and the Swans and the Butthole Surfers and the Screaming Trees and Soundgarden. I got really heavily into that whole kind of like Seattle scene. And then from that, I got really interested in like heavy metal, and I found my way into Paradise Lost and Metallica and Sepultura and Slayer. And basically kind of just developed this huge love of music. But right at the start, the thing that got me to move from being a listener, which, you know, with Queen and Guns N' Roses, honestly, Queen particularly, it felt just impossible. It was so complex and so amazing. It felt like something you could never do. It was alien. But Nirvana, it felt like something that, you know, I as a teenager could do. And I picked up a guitar and I just started jamming along with their music. And it opened the gateway to everything else that followed. So yeah, that was the kind of musician who started it all. And I must say, like now, I listen to a lot more very different stuff. You know, I listen to a lot more kind of Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, Screaming Trees. But I wouldn't necessarily have followed that path if it hadn't been for Nirvana kind of flicking that switch when I was, I don't know, 13 years old or something. So yeah, that hearing In Utero was huge for me in 1993.
Right on. And the one that got me into vocals, and I'm not able to do my vocals right now because every time I try and do the vocals, the growling stuff I do, my mic cuts out on me. I actually broken hope with Joe Patekis, the interview thing. Oh, we're almost out of time, so I'll ask you the last question of the interview, which is what new band news do you have on the Final Coil front? Is there anything we have not covered so far in this interview?
So, you know, the album, The World We Inherited, came out January the 26th, no, January the 16th through Slip Trick, and you can buy it on CD directly from us, or you can get the digital version. We've got a great t-shirt as well, which was designed by Dan Goldsworthy, who's worked with like Sepultura, and he's worked with Zentrix and Aborted and all sorts of other cool metal bands. So we've got some great merch. We're playing a couple of dates for sure, April the 13th and 14th in Leicester and Nottingham. And we're going to be booking dates in the UK later in the year, and then hopefully in Europe as well. So yeah, you know, keep an eye out, keep listening. And we got a new music video, which will be coming out very soon as well, probably in about a month, for By Starlight. We've got 2 videos out already for Wires and for Chemtrails. And we thought we'd do something a little bit different. And it's going to be really cool and very conceptual. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out from Final Coil in the next kind of 2 to 3 months before we start work on our next musical adventure. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And hopefully, if people like what they've heard, do come and check us out. Everything very easy to find. www.finalcoil.com. That's it. And from there, you can get to Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, all the other places. The only place we're not is TikTok, because nobody needs to see me dancing to Taylor Swift. That's not going to happen.
Thank you very much for your time, man. And that leaves us with the station ID, which is, hey, this is Phil of Final Coil, and you're listening to Mangled Music Radio.
Dude, thank you so much.
I need you to do the station ID, though, which is, hey, this is Phil of Final Coil, and you're listening to Mangled Music Radio.
Hey, this is Phil of Final Coil, and you're listening to Mangled Music Radio.
We're going to need one more take of that. I accidentally jumped in for a second. Sorry, buddy. Whenever you're ready.
Right. Hey, this is Phil from Final Coil, and you're listening to Mangled Music Radio.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the interview, buddy.
Thank you, dude. I hope to see you again. I really appreciate the great questions.
Yeah, you have yourself a wonderful day. Bye.
And you, man. Take care.